everyone. It is a great day here in Scottsdale and Phoenix area of Arizona. And it's morning for us. Don't know what time it is where you are, and you could be watching this on record. So I'm going to invite everybody who is on the line to definitely interact with us and put their comments in the comment box of LinkedIn. Because if you do that, we will see it and we will make sure that we actually answer your questions as best we can. So I'm honored today to have a good friend and colleague to talk to about leadership in Indian country. Dr. Traci Morris and I met, I believe it was 2016 or 17. Traci, do you remember what year that was?
I think it was early 17, maybe late 16. Yeah, you're about right.
That makes sense. And you were doing a great training class, I will call it, to get Native entrepreneurs together and learn what they needed to learn. And I came in to do the strategic planning section of that. And from there, our relationship has grown and we've stayed connected all these years in a number of different ways. So Dr. Morris is the executive director of the American Indian Policy Institute with ASU. And I'm going to have her introduce herself, talk a little bit about her background, and get us started.
All right. Chukma, Hachi Chokmata, so Hocha Foat, Eliche, in Konehoma, and Chokachafa, Chickasaw. That was my long-winded way of saying hello. I'm from the Chickasaw Nation. I am happy to be here. And the one thing I do want to acknowledge is that we are on Autumn land and Peeposh land here in Arizona. I encourage you to see where your folks are from, where you're at. There's actually this really cool website that you could look that all up. But we just acknowledge these folks and their sovereignty as people, and that they're still here, and some came before. So, but I'm from the Chickasaw Nation, which is from Oklahoma. So I'm kind of out of place, but I haven't ever really lived in my homelands, which is not unusual in Indian country. So that is my tribal background. Do you want me to go into other background?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the AIPI, the American Indian Policy Institute, and how did it come to live within Arizona State University, and what's your role there?
So, when I first moved to Phoenix in 2006, I was not working for the university. I had just gotten my PhD the year before from the University of Arizona. But I heard about this policy institute being formed at Arizona State, and I'd been here like 2 months. But I thought, oh, that's really cool. I don't do policy. I'll probably never work there, but that's cool that we have that at ASU. So the AIPI was formed in 2006. It was a community-driven effort led by former past president of the Navajo Nation, Dr. Peterson Zaw, who's no longer with us. Him and Dr. Eddie Brown, who was at the American Indian Studies program at the time, and Professor Kevin Gover, who was at the Indian Legal program, he ran the Smithsonian for a number of years, the National Museum of the American Indian, but I think he's doing the Native Veterans Memorial now. They all came together, brought a working group of community members together to advise on creating a college-level institute that would work with communities, but be both interdisciplinary, meaning working with all disciplines, but also transdisciplinary, working in different ways up and down, so across and up and down, and with community as well as other departments throughout the university. So it's always had this community-centric view. We very much run it like that now. I came on board in 2014 as the second executive director of the organization, and I've been at AIPI ever since. So that's the history of the unit.
So it's been quite a while, and I know you've changed schools there, and the institute has moved around as things do in large organizations like ASU.
We have really, when I took over, we were still really in the formation stage, I'd say, and having run a small business, a consulting business before I came to AIPI, I really have run it much more like a startup. than anything else. To be honest, I've been lean and and very mission driven and no mission creep kind of thing. That's served us really, really well because we were really pretty lean in the beginning years. We didn't have a lot of funding. We had like a couple of people on board, and that was it. And of course, my predecessor had a different research focus than I do. So I came on board, I restructured, reorganized. I also, in keeping with the ASU mission and charter, really saw the ability to take us more national as opposed to just Arizona or even Phoenix centric. So we have a much more national focus now, and we're recognized nationally for what we do and such. And we are college level, so we're not a teaching unit. I can teach classes. I have, but I don't teach classes formally. But we do a lot of capacity building and community education in our programming. And so that's where we interact, of course, with you so much. So.
Yeah. And you have how many people now on your team?
I have 6 on my 6 and 7. There's 7 of us, but I'm getting ready to fill one more. And I'll probably be posting a couple new positions at the start of the year with some changes that are happening at that point in time. So we're pretty small and lean, but we definitely are maxed out in our work right now as we've really grown a lot and we really are nationally recognized. And so it's really the time to add some more folks.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to invite folks again to please put comments in the comment section of LinkedIn. We can see that here on StreamYard, so we can react to anything that people might want to know. I'm sure people are curious. My thought when I look down the list of 65 people that signed up for it is probably a lot of folks from your network. There's a lot of folks from my network.
Yeah.
Some of them, this might be a brand new topic for them, leadership in Indian country. So one of the things I had to adjust to was talking about things as Indian country. And I just think that's a neat concept. So what do people need to know if they've never really sat in on a conversation like this? What kinds of things do you want? I know that's a really broad question. Feel free to pick off any branch of that one. What do you want people to know about Indian country in general, and what does that comprise?
Well, let me do a couple of demographics, and then hopefully after that we can talk a little bit more about why we're doing leadership and what that is and such. But here's pop in the slide for me. That would be great.
Okay. Yasmin, can you screen share that for us? Let's find out.
There it is. So I have a couple of things that I always start every presentation with if we're talking about tribes and tribal lands and such. So this sort of will set the playing field. So when we talk about Indian country, we use that term. I use that term a lot because Indian country is broader than saying tribal nations because, well, it also includes the land. And so Indian country is both a legal term and a philosophical term. It's where we're from, but it's also legally defined. And the legal definitions that we have as tribes are something that set us apart from other. We're not a minority group. We're not a racial group. We are racially different, but we have a legal relationship with the federal government, and and it's kind of defined like this: we have 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. There are 334 reservations in 35 states, over 100 million acres of land. Now, this doesn't even include state recognized tribes. For example, California has a significant number of state recognized tribes, but other states do as well. So some states that have huge populations, of course, Arizona's 21, 22, depending on if you count one tribe on the border. Oklahoma, where my people were relocated to, there's 39 tribes there. So it's surprising how many tribes are out there. I'm going to move forward one slide. So thinking about definitions, so tribes are basically indigenous communities that are recognized as sovereign political entities. And Indian country, like I said, is a legal definition for referring to the physical areas of tribal lands and often tribal jurisdictions. But we also say it just to be encompassing. And then what we have with this legal relationship is what's called the federal trust relationship. And this is basically the legal obligation under which the United States um, honors its treaties. It honors its treaties. Now there's some fancy words, has charged itself with the moral obligations, the highest responsibility and trust toward Indian tribes. What that really means is we get health care, we have the Indian Health Services, and we have treaty obligations for consultation and things like this. So this is a very different relationship. This federal relationship is defined by the federal government, by treaties, by executive actions and such. And that is what makes us different communities. So in terms of starting a policy institute, that policy institute is to deal with issues of sovereignty and the federal trust relationship with tribes. So one of the ways we can support this is some of the programming that we do. So I hope that helps.
That does help a lot. Okay, we can stop.
We don't need any more. Yeah.
Okay, we can stop. There we go. There we go. So one of the things I know is that you become the expert on broadband. And so tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about your work in that area.
So I have been working in the arena that we used to call broadband a lot. It's so much broader than broadband now. Used to be just high-speed internet. But I started doing this work in 2009, well before I was at AIPI. I was already an established and known researcher, having published the first qualitative and quantitative analysis of access, use, and availability of high-speed internet on tribal lands. I published that in 2009. So that became my area of specialty. Now, I brought that with me to the AIPI, and I've actually expanded on that. A lot of times now we talk about this much more. I'm starting to talk about it much differently. I'm starting to talk about it in terms of digital sovereignty. And what I mean by tribal digital sovereignty is we are sovereign nations. We have the right to determine our own membership, how we administer that membership, services, things like that. One of the things that we, in part of this governance, is we have access to a number of the funding opportunities that have come out in the last 2 or 3 years from the federal government to help bridge the digital divide, because of course we saw in the COVID-19 pandemic just how vast that digital divide was, especially in rural tribal lands. So because of that, it's much more comprehensive now. And so digital sovereignty, when I look at that, that is the tribe's right to not only work with, and create policies of its own for, cybersecurity, for the data that goes through its pipes, for controlling its own data about itself, for digital equity for its community members, and digital inclusion for its community members. But it also includes now infrastructure, building the infrastructure, training the folks who will work on building and maintaining this infrastructure, training the folks that will work to make sure a community member knows how to use the internet or access the internet through their community systems and such. So it's becoming an ecosystem, a full ecosystem. So I much more use the term indigenous or tribal digital sovereignty to discuss the ecosystem of access, because this is really a utility now, like, water. I mean, people think it's a luxury, but that's going by the wayside, because here's the deal. You can't get a job without the internet. You cannot file taxes without the internet at this point. If you don't have access, your kids can't do homework without the internet. So it's become a utility. So we have to have access, and we have the ability to control and direct or economic benefit how that works on our sovereign tribal lands. So those are the things that I work on as my area of specialty. And we do have a specialty developed within the American Indian Policy Institute on that, working on those topics. But we have other areas as well that we work on. So
yes, which we'll talk about them in a minute. So what comes up for me when you talk about that is during COVID, when we watched the Navajo Nation in the northern part of the state just go into lockdown because of the spread of the disease. And some parts of that nation are so remote that they're not necessarily connected. I've even talked to entrepreneurs along the way over the past 5 years or so about some will come off the reservation to get a business started with the hope that they can eventually go back on. But it's in that case 5 years ago, a lack of connectedness, a lack of being able to digitally connect and support that business. Have you seen strides in these areas either through COVID or as a result of COVID, where people kind of ramped up their ability to go digital?
So in 2019, literally the fall of 19, we put out a study, AIPI did, that I worked on, which was the Tribal Technology Assessment. So this is the first original data since my 2009 study looking at this. And what we found, and what is still consistent today, is that about 18% of reservation residents have no internet access, either at home, wireless or land-based, cable, you name it. About 33% rely on cell phone service for internet. And in fact, we saw that at ASU during lockdown. We were literally hearing stories about students writing papers in Facebook or, in the chats, from a phone, because that was the only connectivity you have. So when you're talking about these kind of connectivity issues, it's shocking anybody was able to get anything done. But at the same time, we don't have current data because we're still only, it seems like it's been a very long time. It's really been like 3 years. And so that is why there's been a number of key infrastructure programs that have been introduced over the last few years to invest in building out the network. Now, some of those early things, there was a spectrum window. I know y'all don't know what that is, but that opened during the pandemic. So the application was then, and now some of those networks are coming online because they had about a 2.5 year build window. So we're seeing some early networks starting to pop in on tribes. There will be much more with some of the fundings that are coming from the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, or what you may be hearing about from your state, which is the BEAD, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. But those are just starting to pop online. There's been no studies yet. All the data comes from either our original data or the census data. For the most part. There's some FCC data. So it's really time to implement a follow-up study to see the change, I do think that we are seeing change, and because we did see that. I remember the president of the Navajo Nation broadcasting from Facebook at different locations where he could get a signal to talk about where to go, whether they were still on lockdown, things like this. And that was really how folks were finding out about stuff. You have to remember, some of these areas don't even have plain old telephone service. There's still only about 70% penetration in Navajo Nation with plain old landlines, old school. So, in those instances, believe it or not, tribal radio, there's a network of radio stations that really helped get out the messaging then. But I do expect that we're going to see significant changes. Certainly, an example of excellence here in the state is Gila River. Gila River has had, now they had a telephone service before this. They have gone into broadband big time and digital equity and building out fiber. And so you're going to see great strides made in the Southeast Valley that butts up to Chandler and Gilbert. That area is coming online with some great service. There are other areas in the state, certainly in other states as well, where tribes were able to piggyback off of small existing networks and start at least filling gaps while they build out the more robust systems. So I do think when we finally get to do some research, we'll be able to quantify this.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to kind of sit and watch these things. So shout out to Governor Lewis and his team for staying on top of that. I think in the case of the Navajo Nation, it is so large and so far away from cities.
And 4 states. Remember, it's 4 states. So
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
But they do have things in the works. Most definitely. But remember, the problem with 574 tribes that's a lot of data. So how do we quantify that? And we need to do the research ethically. So that means working with each tribe's institutional review board. So
Mhm.
data
It's
processing is slow.
yes, yes.
And we are only 7 of us.
I was going to say, and you have this small but quick team that you can only
I
go so
must
fast with
admit,
that.
though, that we have a tier of folks around us that also work in this field. We have colleagues at other organizations. We have advisory board members that are steeped in this, that were some of my mentors. And I think you can look forward to us making an announcement in the near future about even further strides we're going to be making into this ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you. So tell us about some of the other things that your team is working on or that you're working on as far as policy or we'll get to the Leadership Academy
Okay.
eventually,
Okay.
but tell us about the other things outside of that that are big priorities for you right now.
So we really have 3 priorities. We have capacity building, which is it's community trainings, things like that. We do policy work and we do research. The policy and the research, as you might gather, are integrally twined, and they feed off of each other. So, and then we have a robust communication system at getting this information out, because I've always realized I don't think I'd have had a small business had I not been able to get my message out. So I transitioned that to AIPI. So our policy work we really call the solutions program, because we talk about policy solutions. We're not coming at any of the work we do from a deficit model. We posit a solutions model. We're going to talk about a deficit, and then we're going to provide solutions for change, either through research or examples of excellence and things of the nature. So we don't just do broadband, although we do a lot of broadband. We have done work with certainly the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. We did some work with the state. The state tapped the university to do their comprehensive report a couple of years ago, and I did one of the chapters in that. Because connectivity affects whether or not somebody in a dire situation
Yeah.
can make a phone call or text. And so I had to talk about in that context. We have done some work as well with the Kyle Water Center, talking about water a few years ago. I know that they're actually hoping to bring on somebody tribal to be more specific in that range, which we applaud, because 27% of the water in this state is owned by tribes.
Mm.
So we have to be a part of the discussions and have a seat at the table. So we are looking to do more in the very near future with Indian education, as we are partnering with the Center for Indian Education on the campus, and we'll be hiring a joint policy analyst to leap into that space. And of course, with ASU, we've got healthcare coming down the line. So I suspect we'll have a pretty deep dive at some point into technology and the impacts on healthcare, because that's another place. Broadband and connectivity underpins all of these areas and facets of our life. So we have a lot to bring to various areas. But we consistently, through our policy solutions program, publish quarterly policy and updates about what's going on at the state, at the federal level, and everything from hearings and laws to federal register activity and things like that. We publish that quarterly. We do timely topical briefs, topical calls to action and such through the policy solutions.
Mhm.
And then papers. We do longer form papers as well. We have been working on a couple of on the research side. We have an article that's just gone to press on on an overview of tribal broadband for the Journal of Rural Sociology. I believe that will be published. It's a peer-reviewed journal that'll be published early in the year.
Mhm.
And we're currently in the process of hunkering down and writing for a new book. I'm doing a book, an edited volume myself. I'm one of the authors, but I'm also the editor, on tribal digital sovereignty. And that will be with the University of Arizona Press. We're aiming for a 2025 publication, but we're doing the writing right now, and working with the Ameren Foundation in Southern Arizona. And they're sponsoring us to do a retreat and workshop all of our chapters early in the year next year before they all go to peer review. So we do both the research and the policy, and then we are publishing all of that work in a much more real-time space. Prior to COVID, putting out a paper every few years was fine, but that's not how things roll now. It's not even how laws are made now. And so we've had to really ramp up and do shorter bursts. And we do a blog post a lot of time if it's informational. And if we have time, we'll do, a fact sheet or a call to action or a brief if it's a longer subject. But papers, we're trying to do journal articles because they're at least memorializing the work that we're doing. But it's very different now in terms of how fast everything moves. If we want to be relevant, we have to be getting things out right away. But we are not ignoring, of course, the fact that we have this amazing academic institution at our disposal. And we do a lot of work with colleagues. We partner a lot. That expands our capacity greatly. So if we can partner on something, we don't take the lead. We worked with Kyle Water Policy, but we didn't take the lead. They led, we brought our perspective. Same thing with missing and murdered Indigenous people and in other arenas as well. Lending expertise and co-publishing is a way we can stay relevant and visible without having to have a person for every topic, because that's just too heavy. It's too heavy of a load financially to carry.
And I think your team does a great job with social media for AIPI. I follow you on LinkedIn. I'm on your newsletter. There's lots of ways that I've watched your team adapt over time, just in this short period of time that we've known each other. There's just been leaps and bounds in our world about how you have to get out there and communicate with people. So it's all changed. So let's talk about one of my favorite things, the Indigenous Leadership Academy that you started a while back, and we're on cohort group 4 right now, I believe. Is it
cohort 4 finishes on Saturday, and we will be announcing cohort 5 applications here in a couple of 3 weeks. I'm gonna get throttled because I don't know the date. I used to be able to know all the nitty-gritty. So the Indigenous Leadership Academy is something I'm very proud of. It's funny because when you and I first met, Laurie, I had come from being an entrepreneur, and in 16 and 17, 15, 16, and 17, there was a lot on entrepreneur, and there was very few natives out there doing it. And I had been through so many trainings through the state SBDC system and other colleagues I met through that process about, how do you have your own business? How do you, pivot? Of course, I graduated right before the downturn. I had to pivot. I couldn't find the kind of academic work at the time that I was. So I started a business and did the academic work. I was still doing academic work. I just was, and then got affiliation. But it was very difficult because nobody knew the things about, how long it took to cultivate business. What was the cost of doing business, networking in Indian country, things like that. And so when I came on board at AIPI, I had an opportunity. I got a small grant to create a training program. And we were already successfully implementing another program called the Tribal Financial Managers Certificate Program, where we worked with the Native American Finance Officers Association to train tribal grant managers on how to report, because there's specific federal requirements on grant reporting that has a whole nother layer that's tribal. So we were doing that training, and I'm like, yeah, I had the idea that we should do an entrepreneur program, and I had some seed funding, and it was a great little learning experience that unfortunately I wasn't able to fund much more than one cohort. But what we ended up with was, I feel like we opened up a space, and a lot of native orgs popped right into that space, which is right. And that's the way it should have been.
Yes.
I mean, certainly we have fabulous stuff here in town, Cahokia, and stuff up north as well. But that was our first foray into it. So when literally at the end of 2020, like the end of the year, we're doing nothing. It's November, and a funder came to the university, to our vice president, and said, "Hey, we'd like to sponsor a leadership program for tribal folks. Do you have somebody that can do it?" And they brought it to me, and I was like, "Yes, yes, yes." So I'm somebody who's been through the leadership programs, such as Valley Leadership. I went through Valley Leadership, and
Mhm.
I've been through some other programs. But one of the things that I knew was, at the time I went through, I think it was 16, there'd only been 5 of us in
Wow.
40 years of history that were tribal that went through. And it was just like, oh, and tribes are governments. So
Yeah.
tribes, an interesting thing is, tribes are both governments and they are business owners, which is unique in the world in a lot of ways. And so nobody in these leadership academies seemed to get, how do you do business with a tribal government or a tribal business? What's the difference between a tribal enterprise and a tribal government? And so there was a gap, there's a gap there.
Yeah.
And so when I got this opportunity to create my own, I was like, yes, I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And we were, it was still COVID. We weren't
Yeah.
able to create a in-person program, which all leadership academies are based on, these in-person bonding, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we had a couple great strokes, of luck. We hired somebody, our program manager, shout out to Kristen Talbert.
She's great.
And I remember saying to her, "Yeah, can you drive it while you build it?"
Right.
And she's like,
They
"I
we
can
call
do
that
that."
laying the tracks in front of the train. Yeah.
And, and she's like, "I can do that." And I'm like, that's when I knew she was the right person, because we had nothing. We had a concept, and she had to build the brand.
Yep.
And we had nothing. We didn't have a widget. We had nothing. And then we hired a native professor at the university to write the curriculum. And this person had a significant experience writing community leadership programs for tribes. So as she wrote that, Kristen built the brand, and we launched the first cohort last year. And we are now doing 2 cohorts a year, early part of the year, January through April usually. And then we usually do August through the early November. So we have now we'll graduate 4 cohorts by the end of this week. This is an online program, 10 weeks, all Zoom. And it is it's pretty intensive. It's run through our learning enterprise system of the university. So it looks just like a college class. You log in, you get your Canvas, you log into your Zoom. The the first day is a Friday or Saturday. The last day is a Saturday. It's a 5-hour window, and you better commit. And you've got pre-work before the program starts and every week after. And then during the 8 weeks in between are 3 hours, one night a week. I think we've built a curriculum that is, the supporting materials, videos, and writings are very much, they're static. They don't really change unless a speaker adds something. But our speakers bring it to life.
Mm-hmm.
We have guest speakers in every program. And we have tremendous guest speakers. Of course, Laurie, you're one of the consistent ones, because you're one of the high-rated. You and Jeff Blackwell are the 2 high-rated speakers. They come back every one and get the highest ratings and such. But we also have some tremendously inspirational folks. This cohort opened with Heidi Totticini, who's Chief of Staff for Secretary Deb Haaland of the Department of Interior. And we are closing out Saturday with Assistant Secretary Orlando Teller, who is Pete Buttigieg's right-hand person at the Department of Transportation. So we have had tremendous, tremendous speakers, and they bring it to life. And they've ranged that people in leadership in different ways. We've had artists, we've had nonprofit leaders, government workers, tribal government, but we're ending up with graduates. We're at about an 87% graduate and completion rate. And our most recent cohort, one of the members just was elected as lieutenant governor of the Tohono O'odham Nation. We have a tribal judge that came out of one of our cohorts. We have another council person at Salt River that came out of one of our cohorts. We have another council person who also works for National Congress of American Indians from another cohort. So we aim at emerging leaders, but a lot of them are already leaders and just don't
Yeah.
think of themselves as such. So it's
Yeah.
really an exercising in building a community where they can realize that they already are doing these things. They already have these ideas, and then it's safe to practice them.
Yes. Yes. And I see Rory ask us a question. Hi, Rory. What's your vision for those who graduate from the leadership programs in terms of roles and influence within Indian country and beyond? So besides what you just said, what's your big picture vision for like how good could it get?
Oh. So I can see this program from the get-go, and I can see its growth. It's just limited right now in terms of sustainability. I want to build it in a way that it's completely sustained and that we can grow it in a responsive way. So the current incarnation of the Indigenous Leadership Academy for emerging leaders, our goal is really to keep that as a baseline program for emerging leaders. And what I want to see come out of that, and what we're just starting to develop, is number one, some of those folks come back and are speakers. Number two, they all do a project and a project development pitch. So we want to start going back and revisiting and quantifying what they've done with their projects. So there's that. Number two, we do foresee the ability to easily adapt the program to topical leadership academies. So the obvious one would be, a broadband,
Yeah.
a broadband one. But we've also had interest from organizations to create an energy program, an energy ILA, and a behavioral health ILA. I think those would be easy to do. We don't have to strip it. We can just build on what we have.
Right.
I think that the goal right now is to continue to build the cohorts and keep that network alive. And one of the ways we're being able to do that is we have a new partner, the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development, who does an annual conference. It's very big in Indian country, called the Reservation Economic Summit, or RES, as it's lovingly called. And this is a huge event in Las Vegas every year. It's been going on for many years and such. So we did a pilot program this spring where we took our cohort. We ended their final, instead of doing a 5-hour final day, we took them to Res for their final day. Did it live. And then they got fully comped to not only go to this conference, but to go to all the sessions. All the food was comped and such. And then we also had a number of different leaders and inspirational folks come in and talk to them and such. And that was really, really impactful. People were getting headshots, learning how to speed date, things like that. So we are partnering with them again for the spring cohort. And so you will see us at Res. If you go, please come and say hi. But being able to build the kind of network that we have, the kind of camaraderie, it's not limited. What we found is it's not limited to in-person. It's limited to your content and how it's facilitated. And we have good content, good facilitators, good speakers. Now, the bonus is certainly going to Res and meeting folks. So I think the next step would be to create the alumni situation as well, and they indeed are the ones talking up the applications. I have to say now that our applicants, we run about 55 applicants for 25-ish spots every cohort.
Yes.
And they're beyond our 6 degrees of separation, as they say. They're coming from recommendations from people who've gone through the program now, the applicants are.
Yeah.
So I think that lends to the sustainability. That's part of their influence in Indian country. But now being able to know, so speaking, Rory, of influence in Indian country, when I do work with National Congress of American Indians, I can call up that graduate and say, hey, who do I need? I have another contact there myself, but all the cohort has that same contact, not just me. That whole cohort can call up the National Congress of American Indians and he can help. Or the inauguration of the new leadership a few weeks back of the Tohono O'odham Nation, there were a lot of tribal leaders at that event, but there was also members of the cohort at that event that helped this person, the vice governor get elected there. So they're creating a system unto themselves. We're not doing that. They're doing it because they're already leaders.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been fascinating to really be, I'm just making sure I'm getting all the comments here. So pardon me 1 second. Okay. So it's interesting being able to talk to the leaders in there about networking. And then my network has grown as a result of that because I invite them to reach out on LinkedIn. But just one good example is Rory, who's asking us questions, is from one of my networks where I went to learn how to do performance-based keynotes, and so did he. And so I know Rory and his wife now from that program. And so our lives continue to cross and intersect. And, I think we have richer lives because of the networks that we form.
I do too. And I think that that's one of the important reasons that we always have you speak well, number one, with the first cohort we did it, we had you speak, and I think it was midway through, and we've had LinkedIn as a requirement of our folks to use, and they didn't know how to use it.
Right.
So we had videotaped your presentation on LinkedIn, and we now use that as a prerequisite that they have to do before they can get into the first.
I didn't know that.
Oh, we have to, because otherwise most of them don't know how to use it, or they're not using it, or they've set it up just to apply.
Yes.
And so we have that video, the original video, as a prerequisite for them to learn how to use it. And then so that way, when you come back in, we've headed off the beginning stuff so that when you do speak. But I think that creating that network in a virtual space has been hard. It is definitely harder.
Yes.
And I do see more and more of it on LinkedIn. I think there used to be a Twitter component before when it was Twitter, called native Twitter, but that is very much gone now. And I do see it starting finally to replicate, but I don't think people realize the value of replicating those networks there as well as in person. And so I think you've brought a lot of that to us, and that's why we have you back. That for us is why we have you back every time, is to talk about the importance of that. But it's been difficult for folks who don't want to, Facebook traditionally is where Indian country has been online, but that's an older generation now, an older demographic. There's still certainly folks there, but LinkedIn is becoming the space. And so we're really working diligently to keep them connected that way. So we have groups, so I can post info too. Like we get calls for boards now. People come to us and ask us to post information about calls for boards, and we put that in our group. Or calls to, there's some new political trainings, how to run for office. We've put those in that as well. Calls for speakers. We can put that all in the LinkedIn group, and we don't have to email everybody. And so they're learning.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can underestimate the importance of the networks. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you've talked me into going to Res. So
you're going to love Res. You're going to love it.
I will love it. And I feel like it's going to be an overwhelming experience.
It will. It will be exhausting.
Yes. Yes. I expect to escape to my room every once in a while and then go, and because pretty much any conference I go to that you're doing that kind of networking. Yes, I'm an extrovert, and the older I get, the more I value my downtime where I can just go and get the mental peace back and then come back out again.
Absolutely. But anybody who wants to interact with Native business owners, tribal enterprises, and look at economic development in Indian country, they should go to Reservation Economics Summit.
Yep. And I think it's still on Early Bird, but I don't know.
I think it's still on Early Bird. They opened it early this year, but it's moved up. So last year was in April. This year it's in March. So or this coming year, it's going to be in March. But it's at Caesar's Palace. As I understand it, it's going to be an even bigger set of folks coming and vendors coming. So it's definitely You can do as many meetings without ever going to the conference, just being there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's see what else I have on my list, because we're coming up to quarter of the hour, and that's usually my time of like, okay, what else did we want to cover here? What else did you want to cover, Traci? Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think we went into a lot of things. I mean, I certainly appreciate talking about the Indigenous Leadership Academy and of certainly the other work that we do in terms of research and such. We've talked about most everything on the list that we talked about, and this is what we do. This is how we do things and such.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And I know you do some speaking engagement, but your time is limited. What kinds of speaking engagements and things like that do you do?
I tend to do mostly keynotes now on tribal digital sovereignty or something specific to that effect, because I have a staff member that is now doing all of the more nitty gritty stuff. He does a lot of the conferences on the campus and such. So I tend to do work. Like last year, I spoke for everything from the American Association of Colleges and Universities to NASA. So
Mhm,
I tend to do keynotes. I tend to talk about access, broadband and access and tribal digital sovereignty. That tends to be most of it. I've done so much public speaking, though,
yeah.
in my in my arena. I've done a little bit of everything, but I'm trying to limit it mainly to keynotes at this point. Although I do have at the National Congress of American Indians, we're doing a full panel for 90 minutes on this topic, so that's scheduled. I do believe that we are going to be doing a similar panel on tribal digital sovereignty at the Wiring the Res conference,
Mm,
which is put on by the Indian Legal Program in the spring.
mhm,
And we just did one for the Minneapolis Federal Reserve Bank, who has they have a side project for research in Indian country. And we did a number of us, there was a 5 or 6 of us, did a 3-hour panel on topics related to broadband access, availability, and use. So lots of panels,
mhm,
handful of keynotes. you know those are the
mhm.
main things.
And would you like people to connect with you via LinkedIn, or how would you like them to reach out to you or to the AIPI group?
Certainly, LinkedIn is fine. I will, if you're asking me for something specific, you can message me, or you can just send me an email at t.morris@asu.edu. And you can reach out to me about anything about what the team is doing or to learn more about what we're doing. Our website is pretty robust, but it's always a work in progress.
Mhm.
Websites are so much more complex than they used to
Yes,
be.
yes,
So
they are.
it's never quite as up to date as I would hope it is.
Right.
I would encourage anyone who's interested to go to our website, sign up for our newsletter. We won't bombard you, I promise. We usually do a newsletter once a month, keeping you informed of what we do, and we do occasional press releases, and then we do a quarterly announcement about we do quarterly policy analysis and legislative update. Otherwise, everything else is going to be on LinkedIn. We have a pretty robust LinkedIn page as well, so
Mm-hmm.
you can find that from mine.
Yeah,
So
very good.
keep up with us, see what we're doing, because we're always doing something fascinating. We have some great folks doing, different things, and we go to different events as well, especially locally.
Hmm.
So
And I would say too, with the Indigenous Leadership Academy having, 55 for every 25 spots, people will have to apply more than once probably to get in there. So don't be discouraged by that. If you're applying for that Leadership Institute or Leadership Academy, come
yes,
back around, do it again. Sometimes you just end up needing to come back and do it again. Don't take it as a never. So I think we are in pretty good shape. Let's see. I
I just
think,
can't respond to this. Ask for my email. I can't respond to the comment.
oh, Yasmin, can you put our email up again? So we have that. There we go. And I believe we've covered everything we intended to cover, including your book. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. I appreciate you being on here. We're leading into, I always forget what the exact name of it is.
Native
Next
American
month.
Heritage Month.
Thank you. Thank you. And so we're leading into that tomorrow, and
Yes.
we got this in ahead of time. Between our conversation today, and if folks go back on our page to events from last year, we had, we had Jelana Begay-Kropa from Phoenix Indian Center last year. If you want to know about more things with Indian country and what's going on, check out this interview again, check out the other interview, and reach out if you need anything for folks. So with
Absolutely.
that,
And us too. And, Indian country shouldn't be the mystery. And I would definitely encourage folks, there's a new movie out right now, Killers of the Flower Moon. And for those of you who've read it, you know where it's heading. But it's going to be hard to watch, and it's going to be hard for anybody to watch. Be mindful and cognizant of that, and take appropriate care of yourself if it's triggering, because it's a very disturbing movie. So as we go into the fall season and that movie is out, it's like it is going to be an Academy Award winner. It's going to get nominated. And I remember when that happened with Dances with Wolves many years ago, and that movie was so different than this. This is real. That was not. And so be mindful, but we're here, we're all around you. We don't look like you think we should look, like anybody thinks we should look. We're your friends, and we're your neighbors, and we're your community members. And thank you for the opportunity to talk today, Laurie.
thank
And
you.
for all the good work you do for us and everybody else.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, okay, everybody, that's it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time we do one of these. Bye-bye.
Bye.